Fabulous Family Foundation Friday. I like to throw that in every once in a while, David, because it's just a tongue twister. But thank you for joining us once again.
Absolutely. It is a fabulous Friday. We're looking forward to a fabulous Saturday as well. We'll talk about that some more.
Exactly right. Going to say that. You took right out of my mouth, but we are excited about today's because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of good things. There's a lot of questionable things, and we're going to cover those today. So, David, let's begin with this. We had some great news that we fully anticipated a few weeks ago. Update our listeners on the Sixth Circuit ruling now on Kentucky's law, SB 150.
Yeah, Greg, and look, answer to prayer.
Yes.
We've been, talking about this. You and I have talked about it. We've been asking our supporters to be in prayer about this case. But just to remind folks, the SB 150, particularly the provisions of the law that ban so-called gender transition interventions on children, was challenged in court, made its way up to the Sixth Circuit, and actually a similar law in Tennessee that does the exact same thing.
Yes.
They got combined together.
Yeah. We talked about that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we talked about that a few weeks ago. And the breaking news as of late last week is that the Sixth Circuit ruled in favor of Kentucky and Tennessee's laws protecting kids from gender transitions. It was a 2-1 decision, but it was a very, very strongly worded decision.
Right.
Not everything I would have hoped was said, but a lot of really good points that were made in this, and we just want to break this down a little bit because this is really important. We're talking about, to remind folks, this is at the circuit court, so this is one step before you get to the U.S. Supreme Court. And Greg, just in this last month and time period, we have now had multiple circuit court rulings in favor of these types of laws protecting children from these so-called gender transitions. And so I just want to also say just a big thank you to Attorney General Daniel Cameron and his team, who has been working to defend this case, one of his team members, Matt Kuhn, argued the case here recently. Yeah. And they've just been doing a great job, and we were excited to be a part of some of our allies submitting a legal brief in this. Yeah. But what was before the case was essentially the ACLU and some other groups wanting the courts to throw out the enforcement of these laws that are protecting kids from gender transitions. And
now did that include chemical and surgical?
So it's a little complicated. My understanding is in Tennessee they challenged the entire portion of the law. So the chemical side of it, the chemical mutilation, as we like to say, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and I believe in Tennessee they also challenged the surgical side. Yes. In Kentucky, the ACLU just challenged the chemical side, side of it.
Great.
But irrespective, we got a ruling covering all aspects.
And I think there's two things driving this. I want you to share with our listeners. On the front end, the court really gave us some insights on the experimental nature.
Right.
And they saw that from the back end, the results that are coming now.
Right.
Share with our listeners how the court talked about that.
Some of the good takeaways from this decision are a very strong, I would almost argue, emphatic court decision reaffirming that the legislature, the elected body, the policymakers of the state, are the ones that have the purview to make these kinds of decisions. And especially when we're talking about, look, the medical field is regulated like crazy.
Yes.
So the presumption is always that there's an ability to regulate medicine, although we're not even talking about medicine in this context, Greg, as you know. But even further than that, we're talking about children. Yes. So we recognize, there's even further need. And a lot of times we recognize that the need to protect kids and to, in some cases, have different sets of rules for kids in medical contexts than we do adults is very well established.
Yes.
So that was an important principle. Them saying the court should not be stepping in to override what the duly enacted elected officials of Kentucky and Tennessee have done. But further than
the background supported that.
Yes.
They made that clear.
Right. Yeah. But further than that, they really laid bare the reality that these so-called treatments mutilation of children
Yes.
is experimental at best.
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to read a little bit from the opinion. But from the one of the parts of the opinion, Greg, it says administering puberty blockers to prevent pubertal development can cause diminished bone density, infertility, sexual dysfunction. The list of potential concerns goes on and on and on. We heard these in spades in the testimony in the legislature.
And it's proven.
Absolutely.
It's proven.
Right. So they go on to say that this the unsettled, developing, in truth, still experimental nature of these treatments surely permits more than one policy approach, and the Constitution does not favor one over the other. I would take it a step further and actually say, if you go back to our foundational principles, the state actually has a duty to protect children and all people from physical harm, but that's still very, very strong language, and goes on to say that there was persuasive evidence that Kentucky and Tennessee chose a fair-minded and cautious approach to protect children in these circumstances. And then finally, it said, Greg, as well, that if the injunction was to remain in place, essentially the attempt to halt the law that the other side was seeking, that Tennessee and Kentucky would suffer harm from their inability to enforce the will of their legislatures and further the public health considerations undergirding the laws, and to avoid health risks to their children.
Now we're back to lawlessness, David.
So
that's what they're pushing for.
Right.
So because they have an agenda.
It's a really strong decision, and continuing to build the legal argument that we knew, but that these types of laws protecting kids from being experimented upon are right and just.
Well, and in line with that, David, in line with that, I know they mentioned a little bit, because we were talking to Michael Johnson, one of your analysts here at Family Foundation, and he said they went back and looked at the research and the studies and what's coming out of this. The experiments are not working out real well.
Right.
The results are mutilation and destruction of bodies and lives, and suicide rates going up. They really are way more than they claim they are on the front end, on the other side. So let's transition then. We had a front page article in our own here local Herald Leader, Lexington Herald Leader, which exposed their bias. And I'm going to ask them to do something after you talk about this in a little bit. But it exposed their bias. Share with us what we found and what that looks like, David.
Yeah, so the Herald Leader
ran
those that are watching on a video, we've got a little printout here. The front page of the Herald Leader was a picture of Daniel Cameron behind the transgender flag, and said, would a focus on, quote, anti-trans policies backfire as it relates to Daniel Cameron standing strong on these issues in the race for governor? It is clear that they are trying to, reframe this issue. And what's really, really interesting in this argument, and they use the term gender-affirming care, and they even go so far, Greg, to make the case that this is all, all ready to go, legitimate, medically, And I would just say, point them to the decision that we were just talking about. Point them to the reality of what's going on.
They used that terminology. They said that they called him supporting experimental stuff, and that's exactly, or not supporting it, but it is experimental.
Right. Yeah. So, and I just have to say too, Greg, if folks haven't seen the transgender flag, as it's known, its prominent colors. Its prominent colors are pink and blue, two colors representing the two biological sexes that we know. So even in the most overt forms of advocacy for the other side, the inescapable realities
of God's
truths, as Al Mohler likes to say, the ontological truths that
of human biology.
They will trump ideology every time eventually. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is a desperate attempt by and I would say the completely in the tank left-wing media here in this state, trying to go after Daniel Cameron simply for doing his job, defending the laws that the General Assembly passed overwhelmingly in court. And then also, not to mention, they try to kind of go after his lieutenant governor running mate, who's a state senator, Robbie Mills,
Right.
who was who authored and helped carry the Save Women's Sports Act to protect
Right.
our female athletics. Right. So they are trying to make this somehow a front and center issue. And Greg, I know you had something you wanted to share,
let me share
on this topic,
right.
but let me let you do that.
Yeah. So if we're going to claim, I don't know that they do that anymore, David, but you said it's very clear where they stand, the
Right.
left media. If you claim unbiased, why not run a front page article and ask the same thing on the other side about, maybe it's something like this: will a focus on in full support of unproven experimental trans policies backfire, with a full cover photo of Governor Beshear? I'm just simply asking you, put both sides out there.
Right.
Don't try and dissuade or persuade. Put both sides and let people understand what's going on so that they know. That's what we keep asking them here on our show, David, to do, and the Family Foundation. Let's see what's really going on out there, and let's help voters decide based upon where the two candidates actually stand, and all other candidates for that matter.
The one good takeaway that if I can call it that, from this article is, again, it makes it very clear there is a clear dividing line on this issue.
Exactly right.
If
that's my point in the other cover.
Right.
Yes.
Andy Beshear vetoed the bills, vetoed SB 150 to protect kids from these gender transitions. All of it.
Yeah.
While
his ads say that he never did any of that, basically.
Right.
So he is truly lying about that.
And then he also vetoed the Save Women's Sports bill that we were just talking about as well from the session before last. So there is a clear contrast, and our heart continues to be, Greg, we talked about it, but our governor's race voter guide, our church-friendly voter guide that covers these issues and a host of other issues, folks can get that resource. It's we're distributing it all over the state as requested from a lot of churches and supporters at KentuckyFamily.org. But just another example why these issues are issues of the day, impacting what does the Word of God have to say? Yes. How should Christians think about these issues? Right. They are in play right now, front and center, in the election coming up in November 7th.
And let me say one more thing, and then we'll push. We'll promote a little bit of the forum that's coming up tomorrow. Listen, here's all we're saying. Well, if you are for abortion, basically on demand at any time, if you are for transgender of children and youth, if you are for those things, then you need to vote for Governor Beshear. He is for those things. Don't let the ads fool you. If you are against those things, clearly understand that Daniel Cameron is against those things. That's your call, your choice. But you need to know where they stand based upon their records and what they've done, not what they're claiming in ads. That's all we're saying.
Right.
That's all we're saying. And so with that, promo a little bit of the family forum and some of the topics, and then I'll close us out, Dave.
Yeah, we're going to have a full house tomorrow at our Kentucky Family Forum, and we're just really excited. We're going to have a salt and light panel on how the church can engage, Greg, that you're going to be on. We're going to be talking about the LGBTQ revolution and these issues and how they impact kids and the issue of educational freedom. That will be another panel. I'm excited that Walt Heyer is going to be our keynote speaker at lunch. We're going to have a pro-life panel, a panel on religious liberty, and a panel kind of on the future of social conservatism. Yeah. It's going to be an exciting day, and we are just so thankful for all that are going to be joining us, for all the speakers, yourself included.
Well, and we could probably add a few seats. It is full, but we could probably add a few if you want to show up. So thank you for joining us today and tomorrow. Thanks for your prayers. Thanks always to the Lord. Make it a great day, and God bless in Christ. Bill Reeser Encounters next, and at 12:45, Greg Horn and Hope is here. I'm Greg Williams, and you're listening